Functionally Literate. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Zach.
And today we are covering Morte d'Arthur. So then we get into Chapter 8. Shit starts to go down. You thought we had some crazy shit going on. Now we're getting into it.
It only gets worse.
So Arthur, naturally, he's just been coronated. He's like, let's hold a feast of Pentecost, a great and huge feast. And a lot of big names showed up. Of those in attendance, I'm going to name them off because they're important. We've got King Lot of Lothian and Orkney. He brought 500 knights with him. King Uriens of Gore. He brought 400 knights with him. King Netris of Garlet. He brought 700 knights. The King of Scotland, he brought 600 knights. Also, it's important to note that the King of Scotland is the one he's a young man. Mm-hmm. And it's notable among the kings.
We don't have a name, though. He's just of Scotland.
Yeah. The king with the 100 knights.
Also no name.
Also no name, so I'm probably sometimes just going to call him King 100. The king of Carados,
yeah.
Carados, he brought 500 knights. Presumably the king with the 100 knights brought 100 knights.
You'd think. It'd be really messed up. He's like, he actually had like 110-ish, but that king with 110 knights doesn't sound good, so right. Around it. Just as a quick caveat, Chamberlain sees to domestic affairs and the royal treasury.
Oh, okay.
So he's in charge for the collecting and paying out of money.
And mundane city stuff.
Yes.
Cool. So Arthur sees all these kings and their knights, and he's thrilled, right? He thinks that they came out of a desire of love and feasting and worship.
Yeah, they're here to celebrate his coronation.
Nah.
They were not
here
to celebrate his coronation.
He sent them great presents, and they rejected the gifts, rebuked the messengers, and sent word back that they would gift Arthur hard swords betwixt the neck and shoulders.
Which is a pretty metal way to respond.
This was because they felt it was a great shame for all of them that such a boy, an unknown, low-born boy, ruled over them all. They were very offended by this.
Now, this is significant in more ways than one. Obviously, they're rightfully upset that this 15, 16-year-old is now High King of England.
Yeah.
And gets to make decisions that affect their lives very directly.
Probably they're pissed about the whole thing with the lands being done.
Yeah, that would have made some people very upset. But these are also, depending on the version, Arthur's uncles-in-law or brothers-in-law.
Yeah.
And so, because the version that I had read, Ingrain, when she married Uther, had sisters that then married nobility, one of which was Morgause, who married King Lot. And so when King Lot is waging war against him, that is his own uncle.
Yeah. Not that I don't think he's cognizant of that yet.
No, he is. Arthur is not yet, per the story I had read, he is not aware that he was the child of Ingrain and Uther Pendragon. Mm-hmm. He just knows that he was adopted, and Ector was not his father, and so he also was like, I am just this sort of lowborn kid that happens to be king. I don't know how it happened, but I don't know why you're mad at me about it. I didn't make the sword, my guy. I just grabbed it.
Listen, I just drew the sword from the stone.
I put it back so many times, and I waited for anybody else to be able to do it, and not one of you could.
So I'm king.
Right. It's like I don't know how to help you. I gave everybody the chance.
Well, so Arthur, he goes to a tower with 500 of his men. This was the advice given to him by his barons. He hangs out in this tower with 500 men and all the provisions that he needs. And the kings, they lay siege to that tower. And then Merlin arrives in Caerleon, which is where all this is happening. And Merlin explains to the kings that Arthur was made king because his father was Uther Pendragon. So then the kings, they are all the 5 of them, right? One,
5
two,
kings and the
three,
Duke.
4, 5, 6 kings in my version.
Oh, okay.
So these 6 kings, they were like, well, then he's a bastard. And Merlin's like, nah, because Uther Pendragon married Igraine 13 days after her first husband died.
And the conception was after the Duke was dead. That's why it was significant.
Arthur shall be king. Some accepted Merlin's words. Others laughed in scorn. Of note, King Lot, who, if you recall, is Margause's husband and Gawaine's father. So he would scoff because he directly benefited from Uther Pendragon's actions, and it kind of screws things up for him if he has to serve Arthur as his high king.
Yeah. Well, because the reason that their relation to Arthur is significant is that if Arthur's claim isn't legitimate, one of them are next in line. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, if Arthur is a bastard, then the oldest next of kin male of Uther would be king. And if that's his next oldest brother-in-law, because we don't know of any brothers that Uther had. We don't know of any other bastards that he may have sired, although realistically it was many. The point is, if Arthur isn't really his son and doesn't have a claim to the throne, then King Lot is High King of England.
Except he isn't, because that's not what the sword from the stone says. Whoever draws the sword from the stone...
But that's why he's butthurt about it.
Of course.
He's like, this sword is ruining everything. So I have to delegitimize Arthur.
Right. And they couldn't.
Well, because he's the chosen one. I mean, he was the firstborn of the High King, wrapped in a golden cloth and baptized by a demon son druid and given... So
yeah, like I said, some people accepted what Merlin said. Other people scoffed at it. Some people just outright called Merlin a witch, which, I think is accurate.
And a false prophet. We love those.
And so some of the kings wished for an accord. They wanted to parley. Mm-hmm. Merlin agreed, so he goes to Arthur and he's like, come, speak with them. Speak with them as their king.
Yeah. Right? Don't be afraid of them. Don't be timid. You're in charge of these men. Act like it.
So, chapter 9, Arthur parleys. He goes to the other kings with the archbishop and with Sir Bodwin and Sir Kay and Sir Brastias. They're all with him. Yep. Neither side backed down. They just didn't. And Merlin told the kings that he was like, this is foolish. And they will lose, despite having 10 times the men as Arthur. King Lot's like, be we well advised to be afeared of a dream reader? Basically saying like, yeah, right.
I love that all of these insults are very Dark Ages Christian insults. It's like, you're a witch. Like, well, I bet that was a really rough thing to say to somebody back then. You're a false prophet. Yeesh. Now you're just like, haha, they're so silly. But back then it was like, you were saying you should be dead.
See, well, I mean, here's the way I'm looking at it, right? All of this, as you've pointed out, has happened because of Merlin. Mm-hmm. And I think calling him a witch is accurate because he's behaving like one. He set up all of this, so he could put a specific child under his control on the throne because King Arthur, make no mistake, is under Merlin's thumb. Merlin made that happen because some king wanted to get his rocks off.
Well, and all of Arthur's early victories because of Merlin's advice.
Yeah.
So his success in almost every way in his early life is because of Merlin.
Yeah. The man behind the throne.
Yeah.
All of the things that go wrong is because he didn't listen to Merlin.
Yeah. I just like the insults. They're funny.
Yeah.
The dream reader, calling him useless and stupid.
So yeah, Merlin tells these kings, listen, you're screwed. You're going to lose. And they're like, yeah, okay. And so Merlin vanishes away, which I take to mean he teleported. Like, I view this as he teleported to Arthur.
You just got to assume some magical shenanigans.
And commanded Arthur attack them fiercely, but not to use the sword from the stone until you see you go unto the worse. So, like, when things look dire. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they had their first battle, and Arthur's side was losing. Arthur's horse was killed. But then, as Merlin instructed, Arthur drew Excalibur, and they specifically call it Excalibur here in this moment. We were a little bit confused about that.
Yes.
And it was bright as 30 torches, which was
very bright.
pretty demoralizing.
We're talking 60 lumens.
pretty demoralizing for the enemy. This
And not the soft yellow. We're talking the harsh ones.
So, the commoners join in here, and they're fighting with staves and with clubs and stuff, but like it still makes a difference. Like there's way more commoners than there is knights.
Oh yeah,
just odds of numbers. This combined with Excalibur being drawn turns the tide of battle, and the kings, the enemy kings, they retreated. Right. Mm-hmm. Merlin advises Arthur not to follow them. And then we're going to take a small break and have lunch. Hi, this is Functionally Literate. Hope you've been enjoying listening. This episode is brought to you by me. I made this show. I'm Ryan. I'm broke. If you could donate a little money my way with a sponsorship or a product, like, I'll be a shill for money. And I'm going to use that money with which to buy books. Because let me tell you, right now I'm checking stuff out of the library, and it's rough. You can email me at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is FUNC.LIT.POD@gmail.com. You could also be a patron of this podcast. That's right. This podcast, Functionally Literate, we're going places. We have a Patreon now. You can give me $1, and in exchange, you will be able to listen to this podcast ad-free. That means right now, you don't have to listen to this bit. You can listen to the podcast uninterrupted. It just goes without me going on about things that you don't care about. Just for $1. And that will increase in value every 2 weeks because there will be another ad-free episode. Additionally, if you'd like to just pitch a little money my way, like you're not interested in being a patron, you can go to my PayPal, which is also in there. I made a Funklit PayPal. It'll all be in the description. Links, all the links in the description. And we're back. This is probably part 2 because this is a lot.
This might need to be a 2-parter. There was one thing I wanted to mention just about the Battle of the Five Kings that I found interesting, and that is treated with some importance in The Once and Future King by T.H. White.
Yeah,
which is Merlin's insistence on minimum necessary force.
Yeah,
it's not very.
He has a whole monologue about it later.
Yeah, it's not typical of the time. You know, if you could totally crush your enemy so that they could never come back to oppose you, that's what you would do. But Merlin is the guy that's like, you've already won, stop. You don't need to do that anymore. You've beaten him. And that, I think, helps develop that sense of mercy in Arthur that he becomes known for, where he is like, okay, I forgive you.
Yeah, probably. Right, so we're on chapter 10. Chapter 10 is how Merlin counseled King Arthur to send for King Ban and King Bors, and of their counsel taken for the war. So there was a victory feast for, trouncing the 6 kings. Mm-hmm. And they journeyed back to London after their victory feast. And then Merlin told Arthur that the 6 kings will seek revenge. So Arthur asks his barons for counsel. They have no advice but to say that they're big enough, which I think is amusing. It's like, yes, we don't know, but I think we can take them. And then Arthur asks them to speak with Merlin. Because he's like, listen, he's done a lot for me, and he knows a lot, and you guys love me, right? So you should talk to him. So Merlin tells the barons that the 6 kings have gathered 4 more kings and a mighty duke, And unless Arthur's side gets more chivalry, which I take to mean more knights beyond his realm.
More knights.
Yeah. Unless Arthur does that, he's going to be overcome and slain. So they ask him what they should do. And he's like, there's this guy, King Ban of Benwick, and there's this guy, King Bors of Gaul. That is France.
Correct.
So these two are warring with another king, Claudius. I think that's how that's pronounced.
That's as good a guess as I could make.
So you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
So King Claudius, he's pretty well off, is the problem. So his war with Ban and Bors is leaving them off for the worse. So Merlin advises that the barons send letters and invite the two kings to Arthur's court to help him in his war, and then for Arthur to return to favor when he wins. So the king and the barons, they think this is a good idea. So Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastius, it was decided that they were going to be the messengers. Mm-hmm. So they go together, and on their way, they get spotted by 8 knights. The knights stop them at a straight passage, which I assume to mean just there was a corridor in nature that they had to pass through.
Maybe. I think the way my version explains it is that it was somewhere near a river crossing.
Oh, okay.
So maybe that straight passage was a bridge.
Right.
Or maybe it was straight more in a channel of water.
Right. Well, so they stop them, and their intention is to take them prisoners. And so the 2 knights, they pray passage because they were sent from King Arthur to go to these 2 specific kings, Bors and Bons. The 8 knights announced themselves as Claudius's men, and that
so
they're
gonna, you're not going anywhere.
We're gonna capture or kill you. And so it briefly describes how, in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, how they defeated the 8 knights 2 at a time, basically, to defeat them. And there was a lot of jousting and a little bit of sword play, but I don't get it.
It's not all that relevant. All that matters is that these 2 were good enough. They beat 8.
Yeah.
I think, if anything, it's really just to drive home that the knights, the caliber of men in Arthur's court is higher than average.
Well, it's shit prose. So Ulfius and Brastius, they go to Benwick, where Bors and Ban are. So when those 2 hear that there are messengers in Benwick for them, they send Sir Lyonses, who is Lord of Payarn, and Sir Feriance, a worshipful knight, which I take to mean he's a war cleric or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
The first paladin we've ever seen in literature so far.
Oh my God! Really? That's awesome.
Maybe that's Galahad, but
nah, I'm gonna go with that. I'm down for it. So the knights were thrilled to discover that Ulfius and Brastius came from Arthur, and so they delivered their letters to the respective kings. The kings read the letters, and they were all about helping Arthur.
This is a sick deal.
Yeah,
love that.
Yeah. So they treated the messengers very well, and they were amused about the story of their encounter with the 8 knights, when Ulfius and Brastius talked about that, because there was obviously some boasting going on.
Have to.
So then the messengers, they receive Bors and Bons' promise for aid by word and letter. So they verbally told them this and also had it all written down in letters to send back to Arthur. So the 2 return home together to go back to, I'm guessing, Carleon. That seems to be where Arthur's mainly hanging out. Yeah. So they go to Carleon, and they get there by All Hallowmass, which is the day after Halloween, November 1st.
They might do the mass on Halloween.
Okay.
In a similar way that, the Christmas mass can be at midnight on the 24th.
Interesting.
Technically, it's the 25th because it's midnight.
Well, so they arrive then, and Arthur is thrilled and calls for a celebratory feast, which I feel like he should already be feasting because it's All Hallowmass.
Typically, you feast after the mass, not before.
Okay, but it's the same day.
Sure. But I don't know what time of day they arrived.
Oh, fair enough.
Did they arrive before or after mass?
Don't know. But he called for a celebratory feast. And there was jousting.
Would be feasting on All Saints' Day anyway, which is the next day.
No, there you go. So then there's jousting, and then the kings, they arrive. they also arrive by All Hallowmass, which is interesting. That bit confused me, that the kings arrived like basically immediately after the messengers. I guess they were eager.
Probably.
Yeah. So they arrive with 300 knights.
Or it took them a year.
Or that. Actually, I think it's that, now that I'm thinking about it. I just might not have notated it well. So yeah, the two kings, they arrive with 300 knights. Arthur met with them 10 miles outside of London, and there was great cheer and rejoice. I'm sure kings are always thrilled to meet one another.
Yep.
So the day of All Hallowmass, there were 700 knights to tourney. At a long table covered in cloth sat the three kings, the archbishop, and Sir Ector. Gotta have daddy.
Wow.
So yeah, then
Godfather of the realm right there.
So yeah, then chapter 11, there was a tournament. Like, it was very manly. I have nothing to say about it.
Let me tell you, there was some unhorsing happening. There were mighty strokes that befell the many knights until at the end a champion was named.
There was a lot of that.
Do we know who the champion was?
Sir Kay won.
I was wondering if that was the one. Sir Kay did win it.
There was a couple other that got prizes as well. Hold on.
They give it to a couple of people.
Lucas and Grifflet.
Grifflet, nice. I like Grifflet.
So this was before he was a knight.
Yes.
Yeah. Grifflet gets knighted later, by the way. So
then he challenges Pellinor, and that doesn't go very well.
And I think Lucas was a sir. So then the three kings, after the tourney, they had counsel with Gwenbaus, who is the brother unto Bon and Bors, which I don't know what that means, because are Bon and Bors brothers?
I believe they are, yes.
So they're brothers and they're kings of adjacent lands?
Probably.
Okay. So Gwenbaus is their brother.
But not a king.
Not a king. So they counseled
the third of the three.
So they counseled with the third son, and Ulfius and Brastius and Merlin. And then the next day they had mass, then dinner, and then they counseled again. And they concluded while counseling, deciding that Merlin should go with Bon and Bors and their men, and then Gracian and Placidus were to return to Benwick, which is where Bon and Bors' lands were. They were to watch over the lands. So, and there they, when Gracian and Placidus got to Benwick, they relayed what was decided to their people. And so 15,000 men were ready for war. Gracian and Placidus stayed at their king's keeps for dread of Claudius, right? Like, that's why they were there. So Merlin takes the 15,000 men to the sea. He sends back the 5,000 footmen. Because, right, to get to Benwick, you have to cross, which sea is it?
You should be able to just cross the English Channel.
Okay, maybe that's what they were talking about.
Yeah.
So to get to France, you have to cross
the English Channel.
Yeah. So he decides not to take the footmen across the English Channel, just the horsemen. And so he crosses with the 10,000 horsemen. They land in Dover. And then Merlin hides them in a valley in the forest of Bedegraine. And then Merlin goes and updates Arthur. I quoted this whole chapter, whole paragraph, because I was confused what it meant. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could enlighten me. So, with 20,000 he passed by night and day, but there was made such an ordinance afore by Merlin, that there should no man of war ride nor go in no country on this side Trent water, but if he had a token from King Arthur, wherethrough the king's enemies durst not ride, as they did tofore to Espy.
From what I can gather, it's saying that no one he is bringing across the channel can just freely ride through the countryside. They have to have a token of King Arthur. They are emissaries to King Arthur, so they can't be going in lands that aren't King Arthur's.
So they got to hang out in that valley.
He's saying you have a token from Arthur to be here, only here, and if you lose that token, you are not allowed to be here. So have it on you at all times.
Okay, yeah.
It seems like a sort of deputizing where he's
pretty...
like, "You're now King Arthur's man. You're King Arthur's man. Don't go invading stuff because now you're an agent of King Arthur, and that's going to cause us problems."
So we're on chapter 12 now, and I want to mention that these chapters are pretty short usually. The way it's formatted completely different in Zach's book, by the way, which is sensible.
Although none of them are too long. I think the Merlin was about 40 pages. So the rest of them are somewhere between like 7 pages and 20.
So my chapters could range anywhere from less than a page to 6, maybe 7 pages.
Okay, so
averaging 2 to 4 pages.
Yeah, those are all pretty short.
Until you get to the actual war versus the 11 kings. Those chapters were the longest ones. And there was 4 of those.
Yeah.
There was 4 chapters dedicated to that fight.
So far, we're in your chapter 12.
Yeah.
This stuff has all happened in part 1, Merlin.
Right. So I was afraid that this is what had happened before we started recording, audience. I said to Zach, I'm afraid that what's happened is I have the unabridged version of this story, and I've done far more work than you.
And I said... Good.
Yes, because up until this point, you've usually been carrying us. So, chapter 12 was one of the shorter and more annoying to read chapters. So, the 3 kings, that would be King Arthur, King Bors, and King Bon. I'm going to be referring to them collectively as the 3 kings. They came upon the castle of Bedegraine, where they found a gathering of handsome people, who then told the kings what was up. And so, what they told them was that the 6 kings formed, they formed in rebuke of Arthur, and then after they lost, they gathered 5 other kings, and all 11 have gathered their people. And so this group told them that the kings swore an oath pact, that they would not leave one another until they had destroyed Arthur. And the members of that oath are as such. And I have it formatted in a much less annoying way than the way it was formatted in this book. So the members of this oath were the Duke of Cabernet with Cabinet. There's no R in there. With 5,000 horsemen. King Brandigoris of Strangor with 5,000 horsemen. King Clarence of Northumberland with 3,000 footmen, the King of the 100 Knights with 4,000 horsemen, far more than
apparently 100. Only 100 of them are knights, though. The rest are unknighted cavalry, which is interesting.
I don't know.
A little contradictory.
King Clarence, King of the 100 Knights, King Lot. Who, if you recall, is also a knight, and Margossi's husband, and Gawain's father, with 5,000 horsemen. King Urience, who is Sir Uwain's father. I don't know who Sir Uwain is, but they noted
He's
it.
not relevant yet.
Yeah, of the land of Gore, with 6,000 horsemen.
Now, he is also married to one of Arthur's aunts.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember her name, but I can't right now.
Well, so I actually noted that sidebar. We're going to go back because I made note of this back in chapter 2. So, because that's when it happened. So, Lot, king of Lothian and Orkney, he was wedded to Margossi. Netris, king of Garlet, was married to Elaine. Morgan Le Fay was sent to school in a nunnery where she learned so much she became a great clerk of necromancy. And then she was wed to King Uriens of the land of Gore.
There it is.
Who would be
Morgan Le Fay.
Who would become... Sorry, go ahead.
That was Morgan Le Fay is Arthur's sister.
Yes. So he in my version, those 3 that I've just mentioned, Margossi and Elaine and Morgan Le Fay, they were all Igraine's daughters.
So in my version, Elaine and Morgoth were her sisters, and Morgan Le Fay was her daughter.
Yeah.
But...
well, I mean, they're related.
Anyway.
In this version, Morgan Le Fay is his sister. Right, so Then we've got King Idris of Cornwall with 5,000 horsemen. King Urience, I don't know if I mentioned, he has 6,000 horsemen. And so then we've got King Idris of Cornwall, 5,000 horsemen. King Cradlenos with 5,000 horsemen. King Aguisance of Ireland with 5,000 horsemen.
Gotta have the Irish in there.
King Netris with 5,000 horsemen. And King Carados, I believe that's how it's pronounced, with 5,000 horsemen. This totaled 50,000 men on horseback and 10,000 footmen, which that math is off. I counted it up based on what I read. There were 50,000 horsemen, yes, but only 3,000 footmen. So I don't know where the other 7,000 footmen came from.
There were 7,000 unaffiliated random rebels.
I guess.
They were like, fuck this Arthur guy. For no other reason than I just don't like the cut of his jib.
And so with the oath pact made, the 11 kings made their way to besiege Bedegraine because King Arthur owned it.
Yeah. That's all you needed. Just gonna sack it. Why? It's Arthur's.
Chapter 13, pretty short and sweet. Some scouts went out to figure out where their enemies were. The scouts of the three kings went out to find where their enemies were, and they found out. Then Arthur had a dream about the king with the 100 knights coming down with a great wind and tearing everything down, and then a torrential water washing everything away as he left. And then the next day, the scouts came back and warned the three kings that their enemies were nearby.
Yep. Arthur's starting to have prophetic dreams.
Yep. Chapter 14, Merlin has a plan. Basically,
that should be every chapter. Every chapter, Merlin's got a plan.
It is. Every chapter with Merlin in it is, I have a plan, this is what we're going to do. And then they did that and they were successful.
Yep.
That is literally it, because Merlin can see the future.
Yeah. And he's a dream reader, which some people consider an insult.
Exactly. So Merlin has a plan, which is basically to look very fearsome, but not show off all of their men. Only show off a portion of their army, so the enemy feels tougher than they actually are. And then in the heat of battle, when they had been fighting for a while, to reveal the true numbers of their army. And the three kings thought this was a great plan. So Ulfius and Brastius took 3,000 of the men and started just taking out a ton of the enemy's armies, right? And then they were great. And that was literally how he put it. I mean, not literally, but I'm paraphrasing so you can understand it in a modern way. They were awesome. They did many awesome things. Woo.
Many a feat of valor was achieved that day. This, by the way, it's another sort of smaller example of Merlin's philosophy of minimum necessary force. In that we're not going to show the full force that we're capable of. We're going to show a little bit. And if that's not enough, we'll bring in a little bit more. And if that's not enough, we'll bring in a little bit more. But you never overcommit maximum force until it is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. And that's what they did. Sir Kay fought off a lot of guys and protected Grifflet, giving him his own horse.
That's good. Grifflet needed it.
Then the king of the 100 Knights saw him and knocked Grifflet down and gave the horse to King Lot.
Rude.
And then Grifflet knocked down this guy Pennell and took his horse and gave it to Sir Kay, etc., etc. It keeps going on like this. Yes. There was a lot of people knocking down other people and taking their horses and giving it to other people and then knocking those people down and taking their horses and giving it to other people. Like, it's absurd how much of this there is.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that was the main tactic against, like, I mean, night to night in actual warfare was just get them off the horse.
Sure.
Because their advantage came from being on the horse and their armor, but you have roughly equivalent armor. If you and I are both knights, we both have the same amount of armor. But if I can get you on the ground, I don't care about your armor. I'll just trample you.
Yeah.
And then which doesn't matter how much
they talked about doing that too. Like that's what, because when they were talking about the specific word was horsed, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, and then I horsed him, and it's like, what does that mean? Does that mean you trampled him? That's how I interpreted it at first. Mm-hmm. But then I kept reading, and it's like, okay. There's lots of people helping other people onto horses. Mm-hmm. So,
well, yeah, you see your ally get knocked off his horse. that's basically a death sentence.
Yeah.
And so you, as soon as you can, you help them back onto a horse, or they're not going to make it.
Yeah, but finally, at the end of the chapter, Sir Brastius, he slays a knight and then gives the horse to Grifflet.
Grifflet needed that horse, okay? It's very important. That was the climax of that chapter. Was the exact same thing that's been happening this whole chapter. Happened again. And it was Grifflet again. Classic Grifflet. Always losing that horse.
Chapter 15. The battle continues. The kingly duo, Bon and Bors, enter the fray with 10,000 men. Meanwhile, Sirs Kay, Grifflet, Lucas, Gwynus, Bryant, and Bellius are fighting 6 of the 11 kings. Lot, Nentris, Bradagoras, Idris, Urians, and Aguasants. They were evenly matched. I should mention, anytime it mentions like these specific people fought these specific people, it wasn't just them. Unless it was like jousting or something. In this war, when they talk about that, they mean these people and their armies went and fought each other.
Yeah.
These 6 knights fight these 6 kings, and they were evenly matched. And Arthur sees that they're evenly matched, and the fighting is just incessant, and it's unclear how long it'll go on. So he swoops in and kills 20 knights. Like, literally, they describe him killing 20 knights.
In my version, he maims another 40.
Yeah, there you go.
He killed 20, but he maimed another 40. So he put in that work.
And so King Lot, he can see the battle isn't going the way he wants it to. And so he says to the others that if they keep going this way, they'll be destroyed. So he takes King 100 and Aguasants and Idris and the Duke of Cabernet and their men with them and tells the remaining 6 kings to keep fighting Arthur's armies for a while. And so then Lionses and Pharians, they're kicking ass, and King Idris is nearly defeated by them. And then King Aguasant sees this, and he and the Duke of Cabernet back Idris up. King Bors, he sees that, and he backs up Lionses and Pharians. And then King Lot sees Bors, and he freaks out, because he knows who Bors is, and it scares him. Because Bors is one of the best knights in the world, and he exclaims this. And he's like, how did he come here so quietly and secretly? And then one of his knights tells him, Merlin helped. So King Carados says he's going to fight Bors. And he tells the other 4 kings to rescue him when they figure out what's going on. And they're like, okay. And so, yeah, he goes and fights Bors. And Carados loses. And then the king with the 100 knights saves him. That's chapter 15. Chapter 16, the battle continues. King Bon comes onto the field, and King Lot concludes that the battle is surely lost, for Bon is just as impressive as Bors.
We don't want to inflate one of their egos too much. We gotta be like, he's one of the greatest in the world. He's one of the other greatest in the world.
Right.
They're also amazing.
So then the 3 kings come at Lot's group hard, and Lot's group fights back just as hard all day. And then King Bon versus the king with the 100 knights, right? So then the narrative switches to this fight. This fight got serious. They started on horseback, and then Bon sliced a chunk of King 100's shield off, and then he killed his horse, and then he killed King Morganor, who I don't know who the fuck that is. He has not been in the narrative at all.
But he's dead now. Fuck you, unnamed guy. Random extra that actor got credit in that movie though.
King Morganor.
He's on the credit roll. He's not just an extra. He's in there. Named character, folks. That's on the credits.
So then Arthur sees King Bon fighting in the middle of a field of bodies, and he has great pity. Because Arthur himself, at this point, is covered in so much blood and brain that none that knew him would recognize him. And then, so he's just standing in this field of corpses and watching Bon fighting, and he's just, I guess the bloodlust left him, So then he sees a knight with a decent horse smote him through the head down to his teeth, which I take to mean that
from the top all the way down
the sword
to the jaw.
went down to his jaw, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Takes him off the horse, gives it to King Ba. Battle continues, and it is great and terrible. And then King Lot suggests of the 11 kings, he suggests to his pact mates that they take their horsemen and abandon the footmen. Arthur will likely take pity on the footmen in favor of pursuing the horsemen. So they all agree that this is a great idea to flee and reaffirm their pact not to abandon one another.
Mm-hmm. Now, the motive here is interesting because you would generally think that these men, as leaders in this time, couldn't give one shit less about commoners.
Right.
And yet their plan here is, if we take all of our knights and cavalry and we run away, then Arthur might not kill all of the commoners, and that would be better. Right. So it's interesting because they are running away. I mean, it's a withdrawal.
Yeah.
But they're doing it with the intent of not letting all the commoners die.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of an uncharacteristic, you would think.
Well, that's what King Lot thinks.
And that's one of those moments where King Lot, to me, becomes just a little bit more personable. Mm-hmm. Where you're like, oh, he's not, I mean, he's still probably not great, but he doesn't see these not as people.
He doesn't know that Arthur's going to let them live.
He doesn't.
But this could plan be leaving them to slaughter.
But the stated goal of the plan, we can infer
right
into motives later. Maybe he was lying. We don't know. What we know in the narrative is what he said.
Yeah.
And what he said, at least, it shows some sort of consideration for the common man.
Yeah.
And you don't see that amongst most knights, even in the Round Table.
Fair enough.